Welcome everyone. It's Danny Dhaiphong for another video, and as you can see, I am joined by a very special guest, second time on the show, Andy Boreham from Shanghai Daily and Reports on China. Welcome back.
Good to see you in person.
Yes,
welcome to
we're
Shanghai.
in Shanghai. This is the French Quarter building. You will see it up here. This is where the CPC was founded in July of 1921, with about just a little over a half dozen people, and it's the first Congress of the CPC, so a hugely significant place. But with that said, Andy, we have a lot to talk about because we're in Shanghai. It's beautiful outside right now.
A little humid.
Lots of humidity. Also, if you notice, there is a lot. It's capital intensive. So let's just say this is the pinnacle of opening up and reform. Lots of big businesses here alongside the founding building. It's a pretty interesting contrast.
It's a very contrasty, eh? Yeah. Like this Xintiandi is probably like one of the most expensive parts of Shanghai.
Yes.
With all the labels and everything, and then you have the first meeting place of the Communist Party.
Yes.
So it's interesting.
Yes, it is interesting to say the least, but it's been a great time. I've only been here for a few days, but it's interesting to see. It contrasts a lot. I've been seeing how China's been focusing a lot more on what they call lower tier cities. I was in Lanzhou, I was in Dhaiphong, these hugely diverse cities, but historically very poor. And China's poured a lot of resources, and they want cities to look more like this and to be affordable and to serve everybody. So lots of work in progress, but there's a lot going on in the world, Andy. You are covering on Reports on China, I know, the recent visit by Janet Yellen to Beijing. As I was here, I was out of Beijing by the time she came, but there was some mixed feelings, I think, about the meeting.
Yep.
There was some hope on the Chinese side that this meeting would get relations back on a more solid path, on a better path than they have been. And then there's a lot, I think many, both on the Chinese side, people watching from the outside, who understand that this is probably not going to change very much. What's your impression?
I'm of the latter. I really think things aren't going to change very much. We've seen it all before. Like, we had Blinken here not long ago. Nothing was achieved from that. It's just talk for talk's sake, you know what I mean? Right. And you'll remember last time Blinken left, and then Joe Biden called Xi Jinping a dictator. So
yes.
We haven't seen anything that terrible yet. Yellen just left yesterday, but I think, as I said, it's just talk for talk's sake, which I think would be okay if it was another country or another government that China trusted more. But with the US, especially under the Biden administration, it's just proven to be, talk means nothing. So you can say, you can promise, whatever, but China wants to see concrete actions, which we haven't seen, and I personally believe we won't really see anytime soon. I don't think Yellen's visit is going to achieve anything. A lot of people in China, though, do see her as quite a lovely Nana figure, and they think she's quite soft and friendly, and they were hoping, on both sides, people were hoping that maybe she could see a breakthrough. But I noticed some of the words she said in interviews and on Twitter, talking about China needs to change its ways, stop treating American companies poorly with the way America treats Chinese companies, and all the, sanctions and sabotage that the US does. It's just, so it goes to show to me that she still thinks America's the king of the world and China just needs to kowtow, basically. So I'm pessimistic.
Yes, and I would definitely share that view. Before I go on, I just want to show you this beautiful little park, actually off the side of this shopping area. It really is a shopping area, a very busy area of Shanghai, but we just walked into a little park. Lots of green space in Shanghai, actually, and most Chinese cities now these days, which is really wonderful to see.
There's going to be more and more, like every 15 minutes. They want there to be a park in every 15 minutes walk.
Yes,
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, we learned about that today in an urban planning center.
Oh, nice.
Where it's like a 15-minute community living space where everything you need will be within a 15 minutes walk. The parks, a gym,
hospital,
clinics, toilets, everything.
Hopefully your job as well.
Yes, your
commuting
job.
is not nice.
No, it isn't. These cities are massive. Shanghai is massive. I was just in Beijing. It was massive. It's huge. You can spend a lot of time on the train, a lot of time in a cab.
Yep.
But luckily, both are very, very, very effective, actually. But also, I want to show you all the public toilet So if any of you live in the collective West, if any of you live in, especially in the U.S., you know that those kind of things do not really exist. You must go into a business, you must ask them, beg them sometimes. It can be a pretty rough deal. But let's get back to the...
Well, I just want to mention one thing about toilets first.
Yes.
Did you hear about the Great Toilet Revolution?
Yes.
Honestly,
it's one of my favorite things about
awesome.
China's rise. Yes.
The toilets in Shanghai are so clean and amazing that every toilet you go to, every public toilet like this, most of them are open 24 hours.
Yes.
You wouldn't want to, but you could eat off the floor, basically. It's amazing. I remember back in New Zealand, and I went back recently, the public toilets are shockingly disgusting, but in Shanghai, it's amazing. So when you come to Shanghai, check it out.
Yes, it's New York City is very similar. If you go into a train station, sometimes there's public toilets, sometimes there's not. If there are, they're always disgusting. And most business establishments, unless they're serving the richest of the rich, they're going to be disgusting as well. But yeah, we were talking about Janet Yellen's visit, and one thing that I think I get why the Chinese side wants to be more enthusiastic about something like this, because relations have really tanked. And you know, Janet Yellen, though, she does come out of a kind of a neoconservative school of thought in many ways. She also, in the meeting, there was no even budging, right? It's almost like when Vladimir Putin reached out to Joe Biden, to NATO's leader, and said, hey, let's have a talk about these very legitimate security issues. And Biden said, nope. NATO said, nope, we're not going to talk to you. Yellen might have talked about these issues, but there was no acknowledgement about the other side's concerns. And China has a lot of them, especially in the economic realm, where Yellen, that's where she sits as a Secretary of Treasury. The sanctions, the tech war, the trade war, nothing about the trade war. And it's still going on.
And this is the funny thing, like with China saying they're going to police more the export of germanium and gallium, whatever it is. Basically, that's part of China's retaliation. And she can't understand that that's exactly what it is. And she's like, we're not happy about this. But it's like, you're stopping China from being able to buy, not just from the US, but anywhere in the world, basically, the most advanced computer chips. So basically, you're stopping China from developing. And China's 1.4 billion people from developing and growing. Like, why can't Chinese people, pursue their better life? And this is what it's all about. These trade wars, sanctions, and sabotage. It's just disgusting. I can't understand how she could come here and actually say that stuff with a straight face. Like, China, you need to change your course. We're very unhappy how you're treating. Like, I just can't. I'm wondering. Like, do you think maybe they believe their crap?
To be honest, I think the level of arrogance is so high that they do believe in their. I think that because Janet Yellen said it in her readout, she said that the U.S. Yes, and the U.S. is not trying to hurt China's economy.
But you are.
Oh, really? Because. One of the people helping with the delegation I've been on, I told my viewers about it, the third dialogue on exchanges and mutual learning among civilizations for the center, the Chinese Association for International Understanding. The names always roll off the tongue for us English speakers. But I was talking to him, and he was saying that the Huawei Mate, I think it's number 15, it doesn't have 5G. And the reason is because of what the U.S. has done with sanctions. It has prevented Huawei from getting the chips necessary to update its next version to have 5G capacity. So this phone is actually not selling well because the older version has it.
And that's exactly what Washington wants to do.
Yes, they want to tank Huawei's economy. But continue. So we were just talking about Huawei and how the U.S. is literally trying to destroy China's economy, and you were because
I really feel like because so much of China's economy now is in IT, and I mean you look at in Shenzhen, there's so many amazing companies, like the greatest and best ever drone company in the world, DJI, is from Shenzhen, and a lot of Americans don't realize that. So I think actually if Americans knew more, the companies that Washington is stemming and trying to ruin, they might be more peed off because so many people in the States, for example, use DJI drones. So I think it's really a way to stop Well, it sounds dramatic, but the sanctions they're doing is a way to stop 1.4 billion people from having better lives, really.
Yes.
It sounds over the top, but I really believe that.
Yeah. No, and I'll just show you viewers where we ended up. We're actually behind the CPC founding building.
Great view.
Yeah,
And
great
it's
view.
really
Look
good
at
to see
that
the
park.
contrast.
Yeah, look at the contrast. Look at the little park. Look at the development here, and look at the contrast between the building. This is old building. This is the modern buildings.
And there's
And
like
then you can
development.
Yeah, development up here. Look at, and then the green space that they've obviously invested in. So beautiful. Anyway, we're back to.
Which way should we walk? That way or that way?
Yeah,
Maybe
just-
that way.
Yeah, let's go this way. So, I agree. I mean, it's obvious and it's so multi-layered. It's an economic war, and it's war. It's not. It's not. It's not something that's benign. It is literally an attempt to weaken maybe the most important economy in the world at this point. And it has had some success. I would say that China's been able to do a pretty good job at stymieing and making sure that the pressure that's on it doesn't tank its economy like some other countries that have had immense difficulties with sanctions. But oftentimes you don't hear much about sanctions, and while it's not really in Yellen's so-called jurisdiction, let's be honest, she was representing the entirety of the US's economic agenda at this meeting, and she came in with her hands out with nothing to offer the Chinese side. And I just find that so emblematic of how the US behaves at this point. How US leaders, these neocons, neoliberals, these unipolarists, all they care about is whether they can get something out of China rather than coming with anything at all, any concession at all, which is what you do during diplomacy.
And it's so obvious. Like I saw in her readout, you mentioned just before, that she said, we're not trying to hurt China's economy or the Chinese people. And then she had a little lunch with some female Chinese economists. And she used actually that meme, which was, we don't hate Chinese people. We just have disagreements with the Chinese government.
Oh my God.
Which is hilarious because the Chinese government has such a high level of support from the public. And like more than 90%, I think even higher, maybe 94%. And that's from a Harvard poll. That's not even from Chinese polls. People could say, well, that's clearly fake data. Of course,
Right.
China's going to make a report like that. But it's from Harvard research. So I think it's just something that people don't, especially in the States and in the West in general, just really don't understand. But I was wondering what you think about the idea of business people becoming more diplomatic, because you saw Elon Musk and Bill Gates came. Recently, New Zealand's Prime Minister came with a large business delegation.
Yeah.
Do you think it could be true that Joe Biden and his government are just the middleman?
Yeah, no, I mean, it is something that I think we're going to see a lot more of too, because the political class in the United States is completely invested in war. They see, sure. They see.
We'll swap so you can reach your hand.
Yeah, they definitely see the profiteering, all of the opportunities that the big weapons manufacturers can give them. They see that as just in line with everything else. Everything, whatever else it is in terms of economy, they see military as primary. So I don't expect there to be any kind of changes on that side. But with economic, I mean, Elon Musk right here in Shanghai. I mean, he has
Gigafactory.
development, has a gigafactory. There's many there's many investments here. There's stores for the Chinese market, which you don't really even see in the United States, to be honest. Bill Gates the same way. Tech development here, whether it's the consumer market or whether it's the production of the materials needed, it happens in China. So they're worried. These forces are worried. Whatever you think about them, and surely they behave very badly in domestically and globally. But they know that if China's economy weakens, they are not going to be doing very well. It's going to hurt their bottom line. And to be honest, they know it's going to hurt the entirety of the world economy. It does. It already is doing it. Inflation is rising in some respects because of the way the U.S. has treated China. I could say that.
So in a way, it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Like you wouldn't really want to rely on billionaires for the well-being of your relations, but at the same time, it's just not working with the Biden regime at the moment at all. Like, I couldn't believe that things could get worse than the Trump regime in terms of China and US relations. But it's got so much worse. They just dug their heels in. Like, Joe Biden had the opportunity to turn around and say, oh, we don't stand for what Trump did. Let's get the relations back on track. They doubled down and they got so much worse. And the situation in the States right now for Chinese or any Asian people, if you look Asian, and you're going to be, especially in the bigger cities like New York, we're seeing some hideous violence towards Chinese-looking people, I guess you could say.
Yep.
And I think it's only going to get worse. So I don't know how we can really get out of this. But definitely, it's not just by sending Janet Yellen over to have a 4-day discussion.
No, and I think, again, I understand why the Chinese side was enthusiastic, especially given Yellen's background. To me, it's not a wonderful background in terms of economic policy in the main, but they see her as someone who values China's business, China's economic partnership and bilateral relationship. So I understand the enthusiasm in some respects there, but at the same time, there's nothing that Janet Yellen has said or done during her time as Secretary of Treasury that makes me think there's going to be any policy change. And I do think that the Chinese side, and I think most of the world, understands this as well, because one of the reasons I believe, Andy, that the United States is doubling down on its China policy, on its policy of containment and aggression, is because of what's happening in Ukraine right now, because of the fact that the United States has basically entered into a quagmire with NATO that has no end. They're about to meet in Lithuania.
New Zealand's there as well.
Yes.
Like, New Zealand's not even...
The Five Eyes.
What's going on?
So the NATO summit's about to happen. They're about to come up with some security guarantees, an Israel-like guarantee for Ukraine's security, basically saying this is a permanent war, just like Israel's role in the Middle East is really a permanent war on all of those states, Palestine and the rest. So I don't see any change happening, mainly because the desperation that the U.S. is in right now, that its foreign policy establishment, NATO, in Ukraine and elsewhere, really requires them to focus on China, because they know if they can't, if they can't get what they need to get done foreign policy-wise, there isn't many other options. And China is the big ticket. It is. It's rising. It's doing pretty well, and it is a so-called threat to their very existence.
But the way China sees it is it's exactly the opposite. China says our growth is not a threat to the world, it's a plus for the world. We can all work together. And as you know, China has, in 40 years, I think, 1979 is the last time they had any kind of skirmish in another country that was a border skirmish with Vietnam. China is just not an aggressive developer, if you know what I mean. So I don't understand how people the Washington Biden regime can, with a straight face, frame it that way. But it's working because they have such a hold on the media infrastructure, you know what I mean? The propaganda internationally. And I think that comes down a lot to English being the international language. You know? It's so easy. It's not easy to learn, but it's easy to pick up. A lot easier than, say, Chinese, which will never be an international language. So I'm wondering what you think might be the step forward. If we look back to the UK, they used to be probably 100 years ago the world power.
Right.
And they kind of stepped down peacefully-ish. There wasn't any huge problem, but I feel like the US isn't going to. I feel like the US would rather, whether it's a metaphor or not, blow up the entire world than let anyone else take what they see as the top position. So as an American, what do you think? How are we going to move through the next 10 or 15 years?
It's a hard question to answer because unlike the Chinese side, unlike China, unlike even Russia, and most countries now in the world outside of the U.S. orbit, one thing that the United States has that maybe China doesn't have is a completely and utterly unpredictable foreign policy establishment, meaning that it's not rational per se. A lot of their interests are driven by, there's core economic interests, there's of course core political interests, everything you said, Andy, wanting hegemony, wanting to keep it, seeing China as a threat, even if China says, hey, we're complementary, we're not going to try to have you become some kind of loser, but it's your responsibility to adjust to a new world situation,
which they can't do.
Just like China has. So exactly, there's these core problems, as you said, they can't adjust. The U.S. economy is based mainly on finance. It's mainly predatory. It is not developing anything really at this point beyond what already exists. And so when they see China as a so-called threat, and it's not, of course, the reality is it's not. But yes, I believe that the next 10 to 15 years, in terms of navigating the moment, we are going to see, I think we're going to see an increasing escalation toward war.
You mean hot war?
Yes, I do. I know, and the reason why I say that is because even if the so-called economic elites, like the Gateses, like the Musks, do not want to see it, what will supersede their individual core interests will be the system of neoliberal, yes, the neoliberal, neoconservative economics, this like finance, dominated economic system. There will be a confluence of interests especially in the national security state, who will see China's fall as necessary to maintaining it. And that's why we see this policy of aggression and containment. And you have literally planning happening. And this is what's so interesting about this system, is you can have some of these really powerful people not want it, but then you'll have a lot of other powerful people who really want it. George Soroses of the world.
Democracy.
Yes, exactly. You have these disagreements, and what tends to happen is whoever has the keys to the car will be driving it. And I don't think that in this sense, people like Elon Musk really do have it in the foreign policy establishment sense, nor do I think they have the will to stop it if something does happen. I do truly believe that, and I think China knows this, the way they talk, even if they talk diplomatically. I was just at the Shanghai Institute for International Studies. We were talking to Yang Jianmian. He's the chair of it. He literally said, the U.S. is a declining power. It needs to accept that it's number two. He did not say, or it's going to be just every other country. It's going to be just another country. He did not say he was optimistic that the U.S. leadership would change its mind. And I think most people understand that, given we've had years and years and years of this policy. So how we navigate it, we need new leadership in the U.S. We need new political leadership.
Will that work? Because there's so much entrenched in the system you were talking about that when the leader changes, it does much change at all.
Yeah. Really. Well, when I say new leadership, I mean we need a new political vehicle. I mean, the U.S.
So you mean we need revolution?
Yeah. The U.S. needs a revolution of some kind.
Do you think a revolution is happening right now in the U.S.? Because there seems to be this quite, not a civil war, but there seems to be huge
there's
tension.
Political instability. Instability. And I think there is a lot of tension. I think there's a lot of division. I think most people are fed up. Where that goes, it doesn't mean it's going to be something that's going to lead to quality change anytime soon. But I do think that the conditions are definitely there for people to stand up against this. But we're about to see it. An election season is coming up. What usually happens during this time is there's a complete and utter, how should I say, consolidation of political capital in the hands of these warmongers. And so the optimism, I think, really does reside in the fact that, maybe we can turn around. It resides in the fact that the world is changing so fast that there's going to be some interesting decisions from the collective West coming up in the next several years. Because I don't even know if it's 10 to 15 at this point. It could be
5.
The next 5, and I think they know it. You hear Mike Minahan. He was, pretty high-level person in the U.S. Air Force. That leaked memo saying, shoot for the head at China, get prepared for war. I think that is something that is discussed in the military establishment quite frequently. And it's because they know if after 2025, There's nothing they can do. China will be number one in the world.
That's what I was going to ask you, because a lot of people say even within 5 years, America may not have the means to go to war with China. Do you think that could be a reality? Like maybe it's just going to switch, and then maybe after that, when America finally realizes, actually, we're past the point of no return, let's just work with China. Do you think that could happen? I'm trying to be optimistic.
We'll see. I mean, I think what happens with Russia and Ukraine, how NATO ends up having to really fess up to the reality that it's either nuclear war or peaceful settlement, because that's where things are going there. Russia will not lose that militarily. There's no way Russia can lose that conflict militarily. It's obvious for anyone paying attention. Now they're having to throw cluster bombs into the equation.
So
and security guarantees, Israel-like security guarantees. You know it's desperate when that happens, when that's happening. And so, in my opinion, I think that it's hard to, because I said it's unpredictable, it's hard to say exactly what will happen when this occurs. But I do know there will be some dangerous forces trying to prepare the way for not letting it get that far. And so, yeah, I think the multipolar world, though, is accelerating to such a degree that it could be possible that by 2025, conditions, it would just be too hard. The world situation will be so different that will the U.S. be able to conjure up any kind of support for that? Because if we think that the sanctions on Russia are bad in terms of their impact on the global south and on economies everywhere, just wait until there's even the threat of a hot war with China. The entire world economy will go crashing within 24 hours.
I'm just hoping that it comes to a tipping point maybe where Washington finally realizes, because at the moment we see desperation. The way they're treating China and the sanctions, not just China but other countries, and the Russian sanctions as well. It's quite brutal, but I think they know they're doing that because they know at this moment they still can. But I think they know they're kind of on the edge, on the precipice of not having the power to be able to do that anymore. So I guess what I'm hoping for is America's desperate now, doing everything it can to hold on to the top spot, but once it reaches a tipping point, I'm hoping that their brains just kick into gear and they say, okay.
Right.
Because multipolar world doesn't mean a world without the US. America will be part of the new world order. It's just that there'll be different centers of power.
Yep.
And it's not all going through the dictate of Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm just hoping it comes to that point where maybe, like you say, maybe 2025, they just realize, okay, we tried. Now let's work with the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Because it's not so... I've lived in China 10 years. I know that the Western media account of what the world... People are saying it's a battle between authoritarianism and democracy.
Yes.
But living in China, it's not anywhere near what they're trying to portray it to be. So I hope also once we reach that tipping point, ordinary people are allowed to realize the realities of the world, which is outside of democracy, liberal democracy. It's not a dark, dirty dystopia. Look around.
I know, it's an amazing place. I mean, it's clean, it's friendly. You even had police coming up to us being like, hey, we're just concerned that you're going to hit people in the head with your stand. Just please don't put your stick out too much in this busy area. It's much different than what you have in the collective West. And I think that one thing that would be so key for whether the U.S. realizes that it has lost, right? The U.S. has lost this war of its own making because nobody else is at war with the United States. Let's be honest, Russia's not at war with the U.S., China's not at war with the U.S., Iran, none of these countries are at war with the United States. They're just trying to develop on their own, independently. They're trying,
with the United States.
Yes, with the United States, but just not, one thing that I don't think many people realize that these countries just don't want to be trampled on. They want to be able to have a say. They want to be equal partners. They do not want to be subservient. They don't want to be oppressed. They don't want to be essentially neo-colonies. And so, in my opinion, I think what will be so important in the next several years is political pressure in the U.S. and the collective West. People have to stand up. That's why we do what we do. I mean, we were trying to speak to our audiences from a perspective of, hey, look, you don't have to be going on this suicidal path. It's not going to help you. It's not going to help any of us. It's only going to help a very tiny few people who profit and benefit from war. I don't know if you have any last comments, Andy. I know we all have to depart. We got busy lives out here. I'm departing China tomorrow. Yeah, I got to eat.
You've got a long flight coming up, New York.
Oh, yes, 15 hours, baby. One way, though. Whew.
Wait, are you going the whole way without stopping?
Yes.
That's a long ass. Ooh, can I swear on this?
It's fine. I don't think it'll be bad.
No, but it's really good to see you here in Shanghai.
Amazing.
I've heard your trip in Beijing was pretty awesome, so I hope these few days in Shanghai will too. You should come back for a longer time.
Oh, yes. No, many more trips to China to come, and of course, much more news, analysis, and conversation. Hopefully, because both of us share the same mission. We're for peace. We're for real cooperation, real solidarity.
And like you said, the next few years is critical. So.
Next few years are critical. So we're going to be very busy. But
we are.
It's been very good. Make sure you follow Andy Boreham. You can find him on YouTube at Reports on China. I'll be sure once this is posted to post a link in the description. Make sure you support this work here. Like, subscribe, share. Also go to the links in the description, Patreon and the rest, and support monetarily if you are able. And until next time, Andy.
Good to see you.
Great to be with you. Take care, everyone.
See you
Bye-bye.
later.